Welcome to Menopause.com's Menopod interview series. And today we have a very special guest, Hollywood royalty. In case you've been living under a rock for the last 28 years and don't know her, she is the co-creator and executive producer, writer and director of Friends, Grace and Frankie, Veronica's Closet, Dream On and On and On, a beautiful spirit, a Frenchie dog lover, Marta Kauffman. Welcome, Marta.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here.
Yes.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I also love standard poodles.
I'm glad you put
I
that.
just have to straighten that out.
I almost forgot. Yes, standard poodles. They're sweet.
Yeah, I had one, and it was pure breed named Prince Bonaparte III, which was, a little difficult to have him walking around with that name. But
Call him Boner.
no, we called him Andre for some reason. I don't know why. Well, anyways, first question for you is obviously Mike just went through the enormous success you've had in Hollywood, which is also equally amazing being a woman in the industry and having accomplished this kind of fame. But you've had so many shows, so much success. Is there a time where you're like, okay, I'm done, or is there more in the tank?
Oh my God, there's so much more in the tank. I am not ready to stop. I love what I do. I love what I do. As annoying and frustrating as the business can be, and as many rejections as you get, I still love what I do, and we'll keep trying until, the next thing happens and the next thing happens. I'm not ready to give up. I'm not ready to stop.
See, Larry and I felt the same way. To start this business at our age, we're in our mid-60s, and to Larry's a plastic surgeon. I have a successful company, and we are, kind of winding down. But we said, why do we need to wind down? We should just start winding up on our passion. Let's follow our passion, because as young guys, we had that same want and need, but we chose a different path, obviously. But we're back, and so glad to hear that with you, because the business could turn you off, right? Could just be a complete turn off because it's changed so much, but you still have that passion. And so how do you do it? I mean, how do you keep that going?
I think one of the reasons I keep it going is that I have a burning desire to tell certain stories. I really want to tell those stories. And they are things I get inspired by from what I read or what I see or what I hear. And they are things that I've just been carrying around with me for a long time. They're like dreams. I'm not ready to throw them away. There's no reason to.
Right.
I may have had knee replacements, but I'm still going.
Well, I've heard writers say that, there's a convergence sometimes of age and experience and story. And so when you were writing Veronica's Closet or even Friends, do you think you could have written Grace and Frankie?
No.
Or did you need more life experience?
I could never have written Grace and Frankie. I was writing about a period in my life that I had just come out of. So I was familiar with it. I understood it. I could never have imagined what Grace and Frankie had to deal with when I was, in my 30s. I just couldn't have imagined it. And as I grew older and went through my own, challenging times, I sort of, all those things go into a little trunk, and then you go, oh, here's the show. And then the trunk opens.
Right.
And stuff comes flooding out.
Absolutely. Now we are going through menopause, what we call menopause, and we feel it's a real thing. What do you think? Do you think men go through a change of life when they get older? And do you think it's real?
I guess my answer, I had to think about it because I didn't think you would ask me that question. So I think something happens with men at a certain age, a number of things can happen at that point. One being, I want to hang on to my youth and I'm going to leave my family and start over so I can feel young. And the other that I see very often is a kind of, I'm going to let go now.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, I would love to say to the men who feel that they've gotten to this phase in their life and they feel like doors are closing. I have to say that for me as a woman, I went through menopause right after Friends ended. So after 10 years of my life, I go through menopause. My daughter is leaving for college. And yet I understood that, yes, it was one door closing, but a window totally opened. I actually saw it as liberating.
Interesting.
So interesting.
Well, one of the reasons that we started this whole thing, the website, the show that we wrote and all that kind of stuff, was because we had a little group of guys that it was basically three of us that kind of hung out and went on trips together, guys trips and all that. Because what we saw was we had sort of like what you were talking about. We had some guys that were leaving their wives of 30, 35 years and ending up with their quote unquote soulmates who were 30. They're 60 something and their soulmates are 30, right? And it was ridiculous. And they didn't see it as ridiculous because they were caught up in it. We all saw it as ridiculous. And then you had the other people, like you say, that became old people almost overnight. Didn't want to travel, didn't want to do anything, started wearing their pants up to here. You know, I mean, all these things that happen. And we figured, you know, we can either cry about it or we can tell people about it in a humorous way, because as you know better than anybody, humor is a much better way to tell a story or point out a flaw than slapping somebody in the face with it.
Yeah.
And so we've seen firsthand the hormonal changes that happen to men, just like women, but they react totally differently than women do.
Right. Yes. Yes. I agree with you. There have to be hormonal changes. It's obvious. Not being a man, I don't know how that affects you men. I know what how the hormonal changes affected me, but I'm sure it's a very different experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, women can talk to other women about it. Typically, they have friends and they talk about it and they console each other. Men won't even talk about it. It's a weakness. Well, we're getting over that one, and we're pushing to get guys to open up about it, because we did on our trip. We opened up about it and we said, God, this is so great for men, because if they can just talk about it and have fun with it and laugh about it, it doesn't get depressing. And and so it's starting to happen. We have a lot of followers that come to us and they write us these great, notes that, God, this is great. We love it. You know, we are opening up. We're traveling more with our buddies. It's a good feeling. So we just wanted to find out if you felt that in the business. Does that happen when you're writing? Because you have your stars that you were writing for in Grace and Frankie, and two older guys. I mean, it's perfect. And what they went through. Now, we didn't see all the shows, but you covered a lot on that show with the guys aging.
Yeah, we did. We covered a lot, from retirement and one of them being ready to, and one of them not being ready to dementia.
Yeah.
We've dealt with a lot. I mean, these were men who when we started the series were in their 70s. Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sorry.
It's probably some studio calling.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. On my house phone.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that, one of the things that frustrates us and a lot of people our age is the fact that, and we're frustrated only because we're not part of it, is don't you think that everything from movies to TV shows to fashion, everything is really oriented at that 18 to 30 age group, which was great for Friends, right? But now that we've moved out of that age group, that's why Grace and Frankie was so important, I think, along with some of the other shows that have been on, to kind of say, hey, hello, we're still here. We're still interested in things.
Yeah, I think part of it is that when you get to a certain age, especially for women, but this may be true of men as well, you're marginalized and somewhat dismissed.
Yes.
And in terms of pop culture, it absolutely is geared towards that. Absolutely. It's one of the reasons Grace and Frankie worked, is because there wasn't enough for women of a certain age, that they could connect to.
And men.
I have to tell you, I don't know if it was your idea, if you wrote this or not, but I watched Grace and Frankie the other night, and there was a scene with Jane making out with a guy that was in her kitchen, right? And it was probably one of the newer shows, right? One of the later. I have to tell you, that was a hot scene. And it worked. And I know how old she is, and it was still hot, and she pulled it off.
She sure did.
Seriously.
She sure did.
You guys she must have been cracking up, but you really must have been cracking up watching that. It was brilliant.
She was great.
Yeah.
She was great.
That just tells you that, it's still happening there, right?
Absolutely. And that was one of the points. I mean, we really wanted to talk about sexuality at a certain age.
Which grosses young people out, right? I mean, like our kids always, when they look at their parents, they're like, ew.
Well, that's when they look at their parents, but when they look at other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not as grossed out.
So wait a minute, you have 2 dogs and a cat?
Yes.
Wow. I had 2 cats.
That's a good ratio. It's better to have 2 dogs and 1 cat than 2 cats and 1 dog.
That's for sure.
Now, do you find that as you're presenting new ideas, there are still these stereotypes, men versus women and young versus old. Is that still around? Because we had a pitch meeting for our show a couple of years ago with some young guy, and he just didn't get it. And he wanted to turn it into a space show. I mean, it's basically a relationship show, a space show, or, hey, maybe they become bank robbers. I mean, it was like talking to, a cabinet or something. They just didn't get it. Do you find, as you're bringing these ideas, maybe having to do with older people, do you find that you're talking to the wrong person at the studio or company?
That's tricky, because I just did a show about older people, and I'm not going to do another show right now about older people.
Right.
That's just not that's not my next thing.
Right.
And yeah, I think there is still a lot of misogyny.
Yeah.
In this business, better than it was. But right at this very moment, it's hard to tell what's the business and what's the market. It's just very difficult to differentiate, and all the streaming services, the networks are all freaking out and reacting. So it's a tricky time. So it's hard to know exactly what the reasons are.
Is it easier, the fact that there are so many more outlets, that somebody out there is going to listen to you, or is it still the same old thing?
It's the same old thing.
That's sad.
Same old thing.
This is going to go viral because your cat's tail is wiggling in your face, and that's really funny. Love it. So let me ask you, when you were growing up, were you funny? Did you think everything was funny? No.
I was not funny. My sister was the funny one. I was pretty quiet and shy, and didn't, until I got into high school, when I found theater and suddenly things opened up for me. But no, I was not a funny kid. My father was very funny.
Your dad was it. Okay. But you saw the humor and everything. You just
I
didn't.
did. I
were
did.
not
I
the
laughed
creator of
a
the
lot.
humor.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
So looking back at your collection of shows, we have an interesting question here. If you could choose any single character from any of those shows to travel the world with, who would it be?
Okay, before you say anything, Larry, who do you think it is?
Who do I think it is?
Who do you think she's going to say?
I would say Courtney Cox
Interesting.
and her character.
I say Lily Tomlin.
That is correct.
Oh.
It would be Frankie.
And
That's
I
who
never
would
read
travel.
that anywhere. I'm just telling you, I just guessed that she is just a spirit.
But you're asking which character I want to travel.
Correct.
So Frankie she'd make everything better.
Right. I knew that. I
She'd
just
make it an adventure.
right.
I watched the first episode again yesterday just to kind of remember how it started. And there were two things in there that I found particularly, one was really funny because it was something that you wouldn't think you'd see in a show, and the other was super poignant. The funny thing was when she put something in the freezer and then was trying to reopen it. Well, that's with our freezer, it's the same thing, is that once you close it, it's not opening for at least 5 to 10 seconds. And I've never seen that before. I thought that was hilarious.
Thank you.
And then the other part was when they were on the beach and Jane Fonda was sort of goading her, and she basically just said, "I'm heartbroken."
Right.
And that was so powerful. Just those two words, and the way she said it, it was really an amazing moment there.
Thank you. Yes, it was a beautiful moment, and she did such a
nailed
good
it.
job.
Yeah.
She did.
Yeah. And you wouldn't, I don't know, I wouldn't have expected her to be that wide ranging in terms of her acting skills, but
She's a very, very good actor. She's great. She's great.
So what's next for you?
Right.
Oh, I'm working on a bunch of different things. One of them is a sci-fi.
Oh.
Ooh, interesting.
I mean, talk about reinventing yourself at a certain.
Yeah, really.
Is that something you've always had an interest in?
I love sci-fi.
Yeah, me too.
Wow. My neighbor up the street has written 11 sci-fi books.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I had no idea. He's walking down the street. He goes, "Yeah, I wrote 11 books."
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, wow, good for you." Some of them bestsellers. So there's a big market for it. Larry's a nerd. You're a sci-fi
I'm
nerd.
a major Star Trek fan. But well, that's, there's this book that was written about Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek. And one of the things that he kept mentioning is the fact that in science fiction, you can tell controversial stories that resonate, but are not recognized as controversial, right? So like if you want to talk about racism or whatever it might be, when you're doing it in a science fiction setting on a different planet or different world, people will listen to it and watch it and say, "Well, that's bad." Yeah, because it's not directly affecting what they see in their own world.
Right. That's really well said.
That's awesome. That's exciting.
So just to wrap this up, we know your time is very valuable and we want to respect that. So woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Or coulda, woulda, shoulda, or whatever the saying is. Any regrets or anything that you wish you had done that you didn't do?
That's a tough question because there are many, many answers. There is a project that's been very hard to get off the ground, but it's so close to my heart that I will fight until the day I die to try to get this made.
How long have you been trying?
12 years.
So
Wow.
even with your credentials and your success, you're still hitting roadblocks.
Oh yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That is crazy.
Do you wait for the regime to change at the studios and then it comes around again? How does that
No,
work?
it's really, it's the opposite problem. You work with someone at a studio, they're really excited about it. And then the regime changes and the person who comes in was like, I wasn't involved in that. I want
Right.
to do my own thing.
Right. Ugh, that must be a killer.
It's rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
We went through 2 years and 6 regime changes in 2 places.
Wow. Well, we don't have to touch too long on this because we know you have to go, but the Africa, your heart is in Africa and African American studies. Thank you. That's awesome. That your donation to your alma mater, Brandeis University, is phenomenal.
Yeah, that may not be well known that it was a $4 million donation to set up a chair or foundation.
Yeah, endowing a chair.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah. And yeah, we thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
Very proud.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
So much
It was such a pleasure to meet you both.
sitting with us for a few minutes and just discussing, just bullshitting, right?
Yeah. Well, good luck on your recovery.
Thank you.
And good luck on your projects. We'll be following you, of course.
Yes.
And thank you for doing this.
And
we really
good luck on
appreciate it.
Menopause.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.